Now it is time for our top five segment, and this
Yes.
week it is top five music documentaries. It's always very interesting to hear about these different musicians and their lives and everything they went through. So it's always very fun. Um, my number five goes to The Two Killings of Sam Cooke. This one's on Netflix, and what they mean by that is he was a big civil rights activist. You know, what he did with his music, what he was able to do with his presence, his platform is something that only seldom people do, especially in a time like that. Um, so to hear like his process, and they had some tapes, I believe, in this documentary too, of him talking about it. To just talk about equality, just a white man and a black man should be able to drink from the same water fountain. We should be able to ride side by side together on a bus.
Yes.
It's things that is absolutely crazy during the civil rights movement. But I mean, it's a beautiful documentary because before this, I didn't know really anything about Sam Cooke. So to be able to dive deeper into his music and feel his presence, I feel like is very special. And now I have, a couple of his vinyl records and from,
There you
when
go.
they originally came out, and it's a beautiful thing to be able to hear the passion in his voice. But yeah, I mean, number five for me is The Two Killings of Sam Cooke.
Well, there you go. My number five probably gonna surprise a lot of people, but I really fucking loved it. My number five is, and I will not confirm nor deny that I'm a Swiftie. Just gonna say, but my number five is indeed Folklore: The Long Pond Studio Sessions,
Mm.
and this was on Disney. And so a lot of my list, they follow along the same format. And so this was recorded the entire time that she was at the Long Pond making this album. So you see her recording the songs, you see the in between days, you hear her talk about the process, you see some of the writing that is involved with it and where the inspiration for the song came from. And it's very interesting to just see them in their natural habitat and how they work. And that's what really like made me just identify with this type of a documentary. You get the music, yeah, and you love the music, but you get the reason behind the music. And of course, Folklore, this one, you guys know that, the old Joe, and nobody knew that he was helping co-write all these songs or was like doing these, and he was under the fake name. And but this is all that album, and this kind, and I don't know. And this one's kind of shot in like a sepia type tone throughout the whole thing. So yeah, I just dove into it. Everybody kept saying Americana, Americana, America, and I was like, you know what? I don't feel Americana. I know that's the one everybody says to watch about Taylor Swift, but I found this one and I loved it. So if you want to go back and just see her kind of chilling and the thought process and the writing and the the different versions of the songs that you don't see or that you haven't heard that are in this documentary. I really loved it. I loved seeing her process of how she works. I don't think she gets enough credit as to how smart this woman actually is and what goes into. I mean, she's a self-made billionaire for a reason. I think a lot of people forget she started from a lower middle class family that didn't have a lot of money, and now she is a billionaire. That takes a smart person to be able to do that, and she's extremely creative. So check this one out, guys. My number five, Folklore: The Long Pond Studio Sessions.
There you go, man. There you go. My number four goes to Jagged. Now it's a play off of her not debut album, her second album, Jagged Little Pill. Alanis Morissette. This one is available on Max. I got to learn a lot more about her because I mean, I just listened to the music. I listened to the hits. It was very fun because you got to experience what it was like for her to go through all of that huge fame in such a, condensed period of time, which was very interesting. And she talks about her thought process going into songs and, being being on tour with just a whole bunch of guys because everybody in her band is guys, and then she was the only girl. And her drummer was actually the drummer who just passed away from Foo Fighters. So I thought that was kind of a cool experience, and to think about how the stars of bands, they always stay in that band basically. But the musicians, they interchange. They go to different places all the
Yeah.
time to where, they're trying to figure out their lives. But I thought this was a very interesting documentary because you got to get to know her a little bit more because as someone who, they kind of write her off as this is her best album and her only good album because even after we watched this, we took a trip, I think, to Indiana and we went to a Target or whatever, and she had just released a new album and her new album was already in the clearance rack.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of crazy that, she had such big momentum in the 90s off of this album, and like her legacy is the 90s. It's interesting to think about artists who can't really evolve with the times, and it seems like her legacy is stuck there. Which is good and unfortunate, and like all of these different mixed emotions all wrapped into one with a nice little bow on top. But I mean, I know she's happy with her career, and her success that she's had. But at the same time, wouldn't you want to have had more success in like different elements of your career? So yeah, it was just a very interesting deep dive into who she was writing that album and going through, a very mainstream, pop publicized divorce, or not divorce, relationship. But yeah, it was a very interesting documentary. So be sure to check that out on Max Jagged about Alanis Morissette.
Yeah, that's the danger, right, of your first album coming right out of the gate and being massively successful. You're always trying to chase that album. And unfortunately for her, like you said, she wasn't able to. And to no fault of hers, it's not like she wasn't talented anymore. It's not like she wasn't still singing her ass off. It's just she could never recapture that lightning in the bottle, and
Yeah.
I hate
And
when that
that's her
happens.
second album. Because if you remember, she was a poppy person at
Right,
first, and
right,
then
right.
completely went rock.
Right. Yeah, when she went that grunge rock thing. Yeah, yeah. And see, that's the thing. How many people even remember the first album? Right?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's difficult, and God bless her, but she's out there. She's still doing her thing.
She is.
My number 4, The Boss. The Boss. Can you go wrong with The Boss? You can't. It's Letter to You. And again, like my number 5 with Folklore, this is a documentary about the making of that album, Letter to You. I really loved this one though, because this one is all shot in black and white, and this one dives deep into his life. Because if you've ever listened to this album is all about his younger life and things that he's gone through, and how he's kind of shifted over the years in his music, so to hear his, like, just basically life and how his life becomes these songs, and then how he works the arrangements of the songs, like how it starts off one way but becomes something totally different, and their recording process is just, it's phenomenal to watch, because like what you said with musicians, and this is one of those rare occasions where the E Street Band is always there. That's the E Street Band is the E Street Band. And hearing the stories from Max Weinberg, and like when Bruce decided to take a break, and Max is like, okay, I guess I'm gonna go play drums for Conan because I got to do something. Yeah, kind of. But the second the boss says E Street's back, Max is back, right? He says, Conan, sayonara, I got to go. That process, and that they're a family. They talk about the loss of Clarence Clemens and what that meant, and how much Clarence's relative coming in and taking his spot meant to that, to keeping the family intact. Because anybody who's a fan of Bruce Springsteen, what is Bruce Springsteen in the E Street Band without Clarence Clemens? Like, it's just. But to be fair, they don't miss a beat with it was a fill in, and the blood is there, and it's just amazing. But and you see the love story between him and Patty, and you see just, I don't know. It's for me. It came across as a family driven documentary about his life that happens to be peppered with some music. I felt like I was in their family, because they're really just talking about his life and talking about their life and talking about how they've gone through all these events together in life, and these and then you just have, and I loved the album. This one's a much more slower album. He's still Bruce Springsteen. He's still got, but it's a much more touching. He's telling a story in this album. And so when you watch this documentary and you see how that story comes together, why the order of the songs mattered to where he was going to put them and what he was going to say, all of that's just in there, and it's so fascinating to watch. I am not musical in any way whatsoever. So to see the process of how that brain works, it's just phenomenal. So yeah, I highly recommend this one. It's fantastic. Letter to You, by Bruce Springsteen. It's unreal.
Nice. Yeah, I think that one's on Apple TV.
It is. Yeah.
Now, next one, number 3 for me, goes to Devil at the Crossroads. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of Netflix and their documentaries. I think they're the best to do the documentaries, in my opinion. But this is obviously the story of Robert Johnson and meeting the devil at the crossroads, I believe, in Mississippi.
That's where it's at.
It's crazy, because it's like an urban legend. This was, a guitarist who is trying to make his name in the industry, just trying to get out there playing at like little bars and stuff. And then one day he just vanished, disappeared. No one knows where he went. So it's believed that he met the devil at the crossroads and exchanged his soul for the gift of being a musician.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just so very interesting. You can still find very, very old clips. I think even Apple Music has like a little arrangement of Robert Johnson stuff to where you can hear him sing and play guitar. And, you hear musicians nowadays talk about this man, and they're like, nobody's ever been able to play guitar like him before, which is crazy, because he was not very old. I mean, everybody thought, that he sounds like a very old man, but he was like in his early 20s or something like that. It says he died at 27, so he's the leader of the 27 club.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things where, if you believe in religion and, they say that the devil gets involved in the music industry, and, I feel like this is the stem, or this is the root of that huge tree that definitely branches out into like the Illuminati and like all this different stuff. So it was just very interesting. So yeah, my number 3, Devil at the Crossroads, about Robert Johnson. Catch that on Netflix.
Hell yes. And yeah, the amount of people, amount of musicians that reference this man as the guy that influenced them. Right. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about some of the greatest blues and jazz and rock, and like all of these people that are famous in all these different genres of guitar. Like, this is the guy. And so you're like, how many people did the devil influence? It's like, where's that music coming from? But yeah, no, that's awesome. I got to catch that one. I added it to my list because you put it on there. I haven't seen that one, so now I'm going to dive into that one. That's awesome. My number 3. Guys, there comes a time when we realize that we're the ones who make a brighter day, and it's time to start giving. Yep, that's it. That's where I'm going. This one is also on Netflix, and it's The Greatest Night in Pop, and it is a documentary about the making of We Are the World and how it all came together. And I was a kid then, right? A teenager. And this song, I don't think enough people of current generations understand how massive this song was. It was huge. It was played everywhere all the time. But when it was initially released, it was simulcast on every radio station, everywhere, all across the country, all across the world at one time to raise the money. Everybody was listening. Like, literally everybody was listening. You couldn't find a single person that wasn't tuned into this song when it was simulcast. And it was to feed the world. It's Feed the World organization, right? And it's We Are the World to feed. But the idea of bringing together basically every single named musician that you can think of from every different genre and bring them together to do this song was like unheard of. So this idea of Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson going, got an idea, and then bringing in Lionel Richie and saying, let's make this happen. I mean, just it's mind blowing. You got Kenny Rogers and Cyndi Lauper and Daryl Hall and John Oates and fucking Joe Cocker and Stevie Wonder and Diana Ross and like just the people in this thing. Billy Joel, it's unreal what they were able to accomplish. And so this documentary goes into what you might think would happen. Definitely happened. It wasn't at all kumbaya, let's get together and be a happy, sing this song. There was some tension. Everybody didn't necessarily get along. There were some issues with how some people were singing. There were some people with how other people were not singing. So the idea of actually getting it together, though, working through it all, and then putting together the masterpiece that came out of it, is something really interesting to watch. There's great interviews throughout this thing. Of course, all the behind the scenes, seeing them recording, seeing them singing, seeing what was working, what wasn't, how they decided to pair the people. If you guys are familiar with the song, you know there's certain pairs of people that sing together, you know, throughout their little arcs, and how that all, like, oh no, we can't have such and such sing with such and such, or we need this voice to pair with this voice, and just the process was. You really see the musical genius of Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie about the thought process on what would work or wouldn't work, or why this melody with this tone works this way or that way. It's amazing. It's really interesting to watch. And as you guys know, your generation for sure knows, they tried to recreate the magic. It failed horribly. It was a disaster. It just didn't even come close. And they had really talented people of this generation try, but this is something that will never be recaptured. And it's a once in a lifetime kind of a thing. And it's so, listen to the song if you've never heard it, and if not, what? And then watch the documentary and see how it all came together, because it's brilliant. It's really fun to watch the process of how these superstar mega group of people came together and pulled this thing off, man. It's unreal.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I mean, Bob Dylan being like, "What the fuck am I doing?"
There were several of them. Yeah.
Like,
and the people who had to sing next to Cyndi Lauper when she's like, "Wow, wow, wow, wow," and then that stays in the song, though. It's one of the best parts of the song. But the people going, "What the fuck is she singing right now?" It's so just. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. You got, highly recommend. It's entertaining to watch, but it's also, and I'm sorry, but once you watch it, you will find yourself for days afterwards singing the fucking song. You can't help it. It's like, we are the world. You can't help it. It's just, it sticks. It sticks.
It's good stuff, man. It's good stuff. My number 2 goes to Tina.
Ooh.
On HBO Max. Oh my goodness. I really didn't know anything about Tina Turner. I don't even think I knew what she looked like before this documentary.
What?
I had no idea.
And now you know how to shake your tail feather.
Literally. But I mean, this was very interesting to learn all about the stuff with Ike and see her success and this our late 60s, early 70s, and then the break, and then come back in the 80s as her own individual person, the queen of rock and roll. It was very awesome to see the comeback story. And I mean, it was very inspiring because it's one of those things where, you don't realize when you're going through the successful times and then until you're not. and then realizing that you can get back to that success as well. So she was a fierce person to be reckoned with, that's for sure. So yeah, it was very inspiring. It was very interesting to hear about how, she left Ike and just completely, I don't care. Like, I don't care about any of it anymore. It's just abuse is not in my forte. So it was, yeah, I loved learning more about her because, she was an icon, really. So yeah, that's my number two, Tina.
She is the epitome of survivor. She is a
Yeah.
survivor, and that man was brutal to her. And
Hmm.
one of my favorite things that about her is like, you did all this shit to me, and I don't give a fuck. I don't want anything from you. I don't want money. I don't want the masters to the side. I don't want
Just
shit.
want the
I
name.
want the name because I earned the fucking name Tina
Yeah.
Turner. Not, and that was epic. She's like, fuck you. The one thing I'm going to take from you is your fucking name because it's the thing that means the most to you, and I'm going to
Yeah.
keep it. And I loved that, man. Have you watched What's Love Got to Do with It? The movie?
No.
Oh my,
Mm-mm.
dude. If you liked the documentary, watch that movie. Lawrence
Yeah.
Fishburne and fucking Angela Bassett.
Yeah.
That movie is hard to watch sometimes. But it is unbelievable. I think you would thoroughly enjoy it. Obviously, it
Yeah.
shows that whole rise, like you said about the documentary. Oh yeah, I put that on
Yeah.
the
There's a
watch
nice little
list.
section in the documentary too that's about the film. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely on the list.
Oh, good, because yeah, it's a phenomenal film. I still catch it every now and then and go back and watch it because it's just so. You said the right word, inspiring. Her story is
Hmm.
inspiring. It's like you can overcome pretty much anything if you're willing to break free and do it. It's just, yeah, it's unreal. My number two is also an HBO Max, and I learned a lot. And I was a huge fan of this anyway, these guys anyway, and I thought I knew everything, but I clearly did not. I was watching this documentary, and I'm like, they did? They what? Like, I had no idea. I'm talking about the Bee Gees, How Can You Mend a Broken Heart? It's got to be one of the single greatest documentaries I have ever watched. They start from the very beginning and they talk about how they were basically like a pop band trying to compete, in that era with the Beatles, and they were huge over there. And they were trying to compete on that type of a level with that type of a sound, and they had some success. And How Can You Mend a Broken Heart was one of the big songs, but then all of a sudden they weren't, the Beatles were riding them, and that sound found other areas, and so they had to completely switch it up. And this is where Barry just is like, I can hit this voice, I can do this thing, and let me try this. And they go into great detail about where that voice comes from, and then the harmony of the brothers and how they work together to make that sound. And then, as you guys know, the rest is history. I mean, they redefined an era with disco. The Bee Gees were disco, and how they were able to redefine that era and redefine that tone, that sound, that vibe, unreal. And then to have it all collapse, where people were just like, they were the greatest thing on the face of the planet, and then everyone fucking hated them, and it was like overnight. It's like, they are it. Everybody wants to be the Bee Gees. They're gods. They're like, woo, we fucking hate you. We don't want to listen to you. We're burning your albums. And it's like, what? And they couldn't sell shit. They couldn't get jobs. They couldn't sell out anywhere. And so they go into the whole process about how they had to become songwriters for other people to survive. And then they go into all these songs, these huge hits that I guarantee you probably had no fucking idea that the Bee Gees wrote. Islands in the Stream. That's the one I got. Islands in the Stream, Kenny and Dolly. I had no fucking clue the Bee Gees wrote that song. I'm like, what? It's a really interesting. And okay, so the music, obviously, but the big thing for me is this is kind of like what I said about the Bruce Springsteen one. This is, but these guys are family, and it goes into great detail about the relationship between those three guys and their younger brother, Andy Gibb, who was not a Bee Gee and had his own success solo, but then got into huge trouble, depression and drugs, and he was in trouble. And when the Bee Gees started to make a resurgence, they were like, "Come on, man, come be a part of the Bee Gees. Come join the group. We'll be four, you know." And unfortunately, he had a little bit with them, but then ended up taking his own life, and it wasn't a very sustained thing with the four of them together. And then of course, both Maurice and they died. The brothers died. Barry's the only surviving one, and he goes into great detail about that loss of his brothers and the survivor's guilt, if you will, that he's the only one left, and trying to process all of how it all went down. And there was a little time when these three closest individuals, like at that time and on the face of the planet, like had problems. There were rifts, and they didn't agree on everything, and so the whole history of this group of brothers was just really amazing to watch. I just, and again, this is one of those things where after you watch this, you're just like, you put on the Bee Gees playlist and just nonstop. I mean, who doesn't love the Bee Gees? I mean, come on, man, the Bee Gees are fucking awesome. But this, all kidding aside, this is a phenomenal documentary and look at the Bee Gees and their music and what it meant to the world, and I mean, how they basically defined a genre and changed an era. I mean, it's unreal. The Bee Gees, how can you mend a broken heart?
Nice. Great choice. Great choice. My number one goes to more along the lines of a festival, which was a disaster. More than the 1999 Woodstock, more than the original Woodstock with no plumbing, all the craziness. But I'm talking about the Fire documentary that was supposed to be held in the Bahamas, and it was very interesting too because Netflix and Hulu released the same similar documentaries about the same concept around the same time, and the Netflix one was just so much better. But yeah, it was very interesting because you have this random guy who tries to throw this random event, and he did it in like the Bahamas on a random island, so you have to fly people there, and then you leave people there stranded with like barely any food, like barely any water, barely any resources, and it was the biggest disaster ever. You got people like Ja Rule involved as like a promoter for the thing. So it was one of those things where I really enjoyed it because I'm like, it's an easier way to catch a scam. It's an idea type thing to where you're like, okay, if something smells fishy, it's probably fishy.
Without
Let's
doubt.
not go down this rabbit hole. But I mean, that guy just got out of jail because he went to jail for all that, for taking all those people's money. And he's trying to go back to doing the same thing, but I definitely don't think he will be able to.
You would
But
hope
yeah,
not.
number one for me, Fire. They're definitely a very interesting documentary. Everybody should watch that one.
Oh, without doubt. Yeah, it's the epitome of watch out for shady ass people. Look, the idea that this guy is coming out and trying to be a promoter again is just unreal to me. It's like, and somebody stupid will buy it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Somebody will fall for it. It's just oblivious. My number one again on Apple is. Anybody from my generation, you had to watch this one. I was excited as hell about this one. Beastie Boys story. Duh, it's about the Beastie Boys. I love this because it's they did it in such a unique way. So as you guys know, Adam Horowitz and Adam Yauch and Mike D, they were the Beastie Boys. And Adam Yauch, of course, died. Fought cancer and died. And this documentary is basically where the two survivors are they're doing this little stage show, and they're talking about the history of the Beastie Boys in like this stage show. So the creativity of how they tell this documentary and how they tell the story was really interesting to watch. And it gets real personal. It's hard to watch sometimes because they talk about the loss and what it meant to them and the things that they had to deal with, and so it gets tough to watch at some points, but it really dives into the history of the Beastie Boys. Did you guys know it wasn't originally three? There was a woman. There was so much more involved with the Beastie Boys that people don't even realize. And when they came out and they hit big, and then kind of like what you were talking about with Alanis Morissette, they kind of fell a little bit, and everybody tried to change them. Oh, you got to come out with this now. You got to sound this way or sound that way. And a lot of people don't know that the same guy that was kind of managing them, kind of working them, kind of doing them, Run DMC hit. And he was also doing them. And it was very much okay, well, now they're the people. And now what does that mean for the Beastie Boys? And how do we change? And they kind of started to go more rock. They started to go more outside of the zone of what the Beastie Boys were. And there was a little success there, but then not really. And they had to figure out how to reclaim what their initial sound was to get back into it. And when they finally went through the struggle and they go through all the kind of stuff, that's when Adam got sick and kind of like, we're seeing this resurgence, we're seeing this thing, and now we're going to have to deal with this tragedy, and that's going to be the end of the Beastie Boys, and that's going to be how. But, they were groundbreaking. In my opinion, and I'm just putting it out there is no Eminem without the Beastie Boys. Legit. The Beastie Boys were the OG white rappers. Like they were, and they brought a sound. They brought a rebellion. These were the guys that were telling you, go out and party and don't give a fuck, have some fun, And it definitely was a huge part of the 80s, and I feel like the rebellious generation of the 80s. Because the 80s was all about wealth. Everybody was rich then. Everybody was doing well with money, and it was the yuppie era, right? But here come the rebellions. They're like, fuck that. We're gonna rebel. We're gonna be hardcore. We're gonna have fun. We're gonna party. We're gonna say fuck all y'all. It's the vibe that they gave about life is supposed to be fun. You're supposed to be out there living it, and kind of and so. This one was really like this is a part of my youth, and so going to this was just something really I was excited to see, and I was worried about how they were going to do it because of Adam being dead, and how do you do a Beastie Boys without all the Beastie Boys? But it's a very touching tribute and done in a very creative way. And they don't shy away from the controversy. They don't shy away from the trouble that they got into at some points and trouble that they caused at some points. And it's a very interesting documentary about a group that changed a generation. Again, much like the Bee Gees and this, they changed and defined a generation and were responsible for launching a lot of who we see today. So it's just, if you want to know the history and you're a fan of hip hop, you definitely want to check this one out. Like legit, Beastie Boys story. You'll be glad you did.
For sure, man. For sure. Yeah, I'm blessed that I got to see all three of them in concert. So, that was a really cool experience.
Oh, no doubt, right? You can't beat them. Beastie Boys are Beastie Boys, right? It's just
exactly. Well, we want to know, what is your favorite music documentary? Please be sure to comment below in the YouTube comment section, or add us on Threads, Twitter, all the good places where we love the fan interaction. So we're always here for it.